This is the moment the White House said could never happen. For 3 months, Donald Trump has been running North American foreign policy like a personal chess match, pressuring Canada, isolating allies, and positioning himself as the indispensable broker between the West and Moscow. He was the deal maker. He was the only one with the phone number. He was the one who told us repeatedly that only he could end the war in Ukraine. But this morning, Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026, that entire narrative just detonated on the South Lawn. Breaking news out of Ottawa has sent shockwaves through the West Wing and straight into the Situation Room. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, in a stunning, unannounced diplomatic move, has directly contacted the Kremlin and placed a formal ceasefire and reconstruction offer on the table for Vladimir Putin. A comprehensive proposal that, according to sources inside the Canadian Foreign Ministry, was not coordinated with Washington, not previewed, not run past the State Department, not even given a courtesy heads up to the National Security Council. Carney went around Trump entirely, and he did it in a way that is, by any measure of diplomatic protocol, a deliberate, calculated act. We are talking about a sitting allied prime minister opening a back channel to Moscow. We are talking about a proposal that reportedly includes joint Arctic energy revenue sharing, a phased NATO withdrawal from Eastern European forward positions, the very concessions Trump has been dangling as his exclusive leverage. We are talking about Canada offering Putin something Trump promised he alone could deliver. The White House found out the way the rest of us did, through a press release from Ottawa at 7:43 this morning. In this special report, we are going to break down exactly what Carney proposed and why Putin might actually take it. We are going to explain the constitutional and diplomatic landmines buried inside this offer. We are going to look at what this does to Trump's Ukraine peace strategy, which, as of 7:42 this morning, was the only game in town. And we are going to answer the one question everyone in Washington is screaming right now. Can an allied country legally cut a separate peace deal with a nation the United States is arming against? Buckle up. The rules-based international order just got rewritten in real time. To understand why Carney's move is so seismically disruptive, you have to understand the financial and geopolitical architecture that Trump spent the first 10 weeks of his second term constructing. Since January 20th, the administration has pursued a single, coherent strategy toward ending the Ukraine conflict. The framework was simple: isolate Zelensky from European support, create economic pain through tariffs that make the war politically untenable for NATO allies, and position Trump personally as the only Western leader with credibility in Moscow. It was transactional, it was ruthless, and for a brief window, it was working. The 25% tariff threat against Canadian goods, announced February 1st and partially implemented on February 14th, was never purely about trade. Sources inside the office of the United States Trade Representative, speaking on background to the Financial Times, confirmed what analysts already suspected. The tariffs were a pressure tool designed to make Carney's government desperate and compliant. A weakened Canada would need American relief. American relief would come with conditions, one of which was deferring to Washington on the Ukraine peace architecture. Trump was buying diplomatic silence. He thought he had bought it. Here is what the White House got wrong. Mark Carney is not Justin Trudeau. He is not a politician who came up through party backrooms and fundraising dinners. He is a former governor of the Bank of England. He ran the Bank of Canada during the 2008 financial crisis. He understands leverage, counterparty risk, and the architecture of negotiated settlements better than virtually anyone in any Western government. When Trump applied tariff pressure, Carney did not panic. He ran the calculation, and the calculation told him that Trump's Ukraine peace strategy had a fatal structural flaw. The flaw is this: Trump needs a deal more than Putin does, and Carney saw it first. And here's where it really gets serious. Don't go anywhere, because what Carney actually put on the table is not a vague goodwill gesture. It is a 47-page formal diplomatic instrument, according to 3 sources with direct knowledge of the document, structured around 4 concrete pillars. Understanding each pillar explains exactly why the White House is, in the words of one senior NSC official quoted by Politico at 9:15 this morning, quote, absolutely nuclear. Pillar 1. Arctic energy revenue sharing. Canada controls 40% of the Arctic coastline, accessible for near-term hydrocarbon extraction. Russia controls another 35%. The proposal reportedly offers a joint Canada-Russia Arctic development framework with shared extraction rights in a disputed zone stretching 280,000 square kilometers north of the Beaufort Sea. The economic value of this offer, according to analysts at Wood Mackenzie cited in a Reuters flash analysis published 2 hours ago, is estimated at between $180 billion and $340 billion in recoverable reserves over a 30-year horizon. This is real money, oil money, the kind of money that changes Putin's calculus on a land war that is currently costing Russia $1.1 billion per day to sustain. Pillar 2, phased Eastern European security repositioning. Here is where it gets constitutionally explosive. The Carney proposal apparently includes a framework for consultations on NATO's eastern flank posture, specifically a commitment to raise the issue formally within the NATO Council for a 5-year review of forward deployment agreements signed under Article 5 supplementary protocols. In plain English, Canada is offering to be the inside voice arguing for the very NATO drawdown that Moscow has demanded since 2021. Trump has been dangling this exact concession as his personal negotiating chip. Carney just gave it away for free, or rather, offered to give it away as part of a package that cuts Washington out of the transaction. Pillar 3, reconstruction financing architecture. The proposal reportedly establishes a Canada-led international reconstruction bond facility modeled loosely on the post-World War II Marshall Plan structure that would channel private capital into eastern Ukraine reconstruction without requiring Russian acceptance of International Monetary Fund conditionality. This is the detail that has European foreign ministries in emergency consultations as of this hour. The IMF conditions, anti-corruption requirements, structural reform obligations are the primary reason Russia has rejected every previous Western reconstruction offer. Carney's framework sidesteps them entirely, offering Putin the economic normalization he wants without the sovereignty intrusion he refuses. It is elegant. It is arguably brilliant. And it was designed by someone who spent 7 years as the most respected central banker in the Western world. Pillar 4, the Arctic Council revival. Russia was suspended from the Arctic Council in March 2022. The Carney proposal includes a pathway for conditional readmission through a Canadian-brokered mediation process that would take place outside existing UN Security Council mechanisms where the United States holds a permanent veto. Read that again, slowly. Canada is offering Putin a route back to international legitimacy that explicitly bypasses American veto power. The message to Moscow is clear and unmistakable. You do not need Washington's permission for your rehabilitation. We can arrange that ourselves. Don't go anywhere, because we haven't even gotten to the part that has Trump's senior advisors questioning whether this constitutes a hostile act by an ally. The White House's response has been, by every account emerging in the past 2 hours, a controlled explosion. A senior administration official, speaking anonymously to the Associated Press, described the mood in the West Wing as beyond furious, adding that the president was briefed on the Carney proposal at 8:17 this morning during his intelligence review. The briefing reportedly lasted 11 minutes before Trump ended it and called Secretary of State Marco Rubio directly. 3 separate phone calls to the Canadian embassy went unanswered before noon, according to a diplomatic source cited by CBC News. The legal and constitutional dimensions of what Carney has done are genuinely unprecedented for a post-war NATO ally. Here is what the White House counsel's office is reportedly scrambling to examine right now. Under the Logan Act, private American citizens are prohibited from conducting unauthorized foreign policy negotiations. But Canada is a sovereign nation. Its prime minister operates under no such constraint. There is no treaty, no executive agreement, no standing NATO protocol that prevents a member state from conducting bilateral diplomacy with a non-member nation, even an adversary, even in an active conflict zone. The architecture of the Western alliance was never designed to prevent this because no one imagined it would be necessary. The assumption was always that allied solidarity would be maintained by shared interests, not legal prohibitions. Carney has just exposed the assumption as a polite fiction. Sources inside the State Department, speaking to the Wall Street Journal on background, are floating the idea of invoking Article 8 of the North Atlantic Treaty, the consultation obligation, to demand Canada formally withdraw the proposal pending Allied review. The problem with this strategy, as any second-year international law student can tell you, is that Article 8 obligates consultation before treaty commitments, not before diplomatic overtures. The Carney document is framed as an offer, not a commitment. It is a proposal, not a signature. And proposals, under international law, are protected speech. There is a deeper strategic logic to Carney's timing that goes beyond the immediate content of the offer. And this is the part that nobody in the mainstream American media is connecting right now. On February 28th, just 3 days ago, Trump's special envoy, Keith Kellogg, returned from Kyiv, having failed for the second consecutive visit to secure Zelensky's agreement to a partial territorial concession framework. The failure was not publicly acknowledged. It was buried in vague press statements about productive dialogue and ongoing consultations. But in diplomatic circles, the failure was an open secret. Putin knew, Zelensky knew, and Carney, who has the most sophisticated intelligence-sharing relationship with the United Kingdom outside of the Five Eyes core, almost certainly knew. The timing of this offer, arriving within 72 hours of Kellogg's failed mission, is not coincidental. It is precision-targeted. Carney is not trying to make peace in Ukraine. He is trying to reposition Canada as an indispensable diplomatic actor at the exact moment that American diplomatic credibility is at its lowest ebb since the Iraq War. This is statecraft. This is the Bank of England governor running a sovereign macro trade. He identified a mispriced asset, diplomatic influence in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and he moved before the price corrected. And here is what makes it so effective. Putin does not need to accept the Carney offer for it to work. The offer simply existing, sitting on a table in the Kremlin, changes the negotiating geometry entirely. Every hour that proposal is active is an hour where Trump's claim to exclusive Western Moscow diplomatic access looks weaker. Every hour Carney's phone line to Moscow stays open is an hour where the American dealmaker narrative loses credibility. The proposal is a mirror held up to Trump's face, and the reflection is not flattering. Make no mistake about what this means for the American domestic political situation. Trump's most powerful political asset in the foreign policy space is the claim that he and he alone can manage the relationship with authoritarian powers. It is the claim that underwrote his peace broker framing in 2024. It is the claim that gave him cover for withdrawing weapons packages, pressuring Zelensky, and demanding European allies increase their own defense spending. The claim that Trump is the indispensable man in this negotiation. That claim requires that there be no alternative. Carney has just produced an alternative, a credible one. Sources inside 3 separate Republican Senate offices, speaking to NBC News' diplomatic correspondent in the past hour, are already using careful language that would have been unthinkable 48 hours ago. One senior Republican aide, quoted anonymously, described the Carney move as a serious diplomatic development that deserves careful consideration. That is Capitol Hill language for, we are not going to stand in front of this train. The Ukraine peace architecture that Trump has been building since January is a political asset only as long as it is producing visible progress. It has not produced visible progress. It has produced 3 months of Zelensky resistance, European anxiety, and now a Canadian end run. The political armor is cracking. And here is where the constitutional stakes become genuinely serious for every American watching this. The relationship between Canada and the United States is not merely an alliance. It is the most deeply integrated bilateral economic and security relationship in human history. More than $3.6 billion in goods crosses that border every single day. NORAD, the Joint Aerospace Defense Command, means Canadian military officers have operational authority over American airspace. The Five Eyes intelligence partnership means Canadian analysts sit inside American signals intelligence architecture. When a Prime Minister of Canada makes a decision to conduct an independent foreign policy initiative of this magnitude, it is not a foreign policy event. It is a domestic security event. The question of whether the United States and Canada remain aligned on fundamental strategic objectives is not an abstract geopolitical question. It is a question with implications for every American intelligence asset, every joint military protocol, and every economic supply chain that depends on the assumption of North American strategic unity. Trump understands this, which is why, according to 2 sources cited by CNN at 10:42 this morning, he has personally directed the National Economic Council to accelerate preparation of a full tariff escalation package targeting Canadian goods, a package that would push the effective tariff rate on Canadian imports to 45%, up from the current 25%, with specific targeting of Canadian energy exports, which currently supply 24% of American oil refining capacity on the eastern seaboard. The threat is real. The economic self-harm embedded in that threat is equally real. 45% tariffs on Canadian energy in a period of global market volatility would add an estimated 22 cents per gallon to gasoline prices at American pumps within 90 days, according to Goldman Sachs commodity analysts cited in a flash note distributed to clients at 11 o'clock this morning. Trump knows this. The advisors telling him to escalate know this. They are doing it anyway because the alternative, appearing to absorb a diplomatic humiliation from an ally, is politically unacceptable. This is the impossible position. Retaliate with tariffs, and American consumers pay the price for a foreign policy ego battle. Absorb the Carney move without response, and the narrative of Trump as the indispensable deal maker collapses. There is no path through this that does not cost something significant. Watch what happens in the next 6 hours. The critical variable is Putin's public response. The Kremlin has so far issued only a brief statement acknowledging receipt of the Canadian proposal and describing it as worthy of preliminary examination. In Russian diplomatic language, that is not a rejection. That is an invitation for a second conversation. If Putin publicly engages, even minimally, even through a deputy foreign minister's press availability, the Carney gambit succeeds regardless of its ultimate fate. The engagement itself becomes the story. The engagement itself proves that there is more than one door into Moscow. And once that proof exists in the public record, Trump's monopoly claim is gone permanently. The deeper question, the one that historians will write about, is what this moment reveals about the structural fragility of American diplomatic dominance in the post-Trump era. For 80 years, American foreign policy operated on the assumption that allied nations would express disagreements through private channels, not public maneuvers. The assumption held because American economic and military power made the cost of public defiance prohibitive. Carney has calculated that the cost structure has changed. He has calculated that a United States government consumed by domestic legal battles, facing a Japan-triggered financial system under stress, managing a president whose political capital is eroding faster than anyone will publicly admit, is a United States government that cannot impose the traditional penalty for allied defiance. He may be right. And if he is right, this morning is not the story of one Canadian Prime Minister making one unusual diplomatic move. This morning is the story of the moment the post-war alliance system began its renegotiation. As we head into this afternoon, watch the Canadian dollar, watch the bond markets, watch whether Zelensky issues a statement, and if he does, watch whether he thanks Ottawa before Washington. Watch whether any European foreign minister publicly welcomes the Carney initiative. Each of those data points is a vote being cast on the question of American diplomatic leadership. Each one of them is a tile falling in a mosaic that, when completed, will tell us something about the world order we are actually living in, as opposed to the one we assumed we still inhabited. But for one man in the Oval Office, staring at a morning intelligence brief that told him his most reliable ally just cut a channel to his most important adversary, this is not a geopolitical abstraction. This is a personal humiliation. This is Mark Carney, a man Trump has publicly mocked as a lightweight, as a carbon tax fanboy, as a soft-handed banker playing at politics, walking into the arena Trump built and rearranging the furniture. The banker just ran a trade the dealmaker missed, and the whole world is watching the ticker. Subscribe and stay with us. The Kremlin's full response is expected before the end of the business day in Moscow, which means before 11 o'clock this morning Eastern Time. When that statement lands, we will be here to break it down. Because the history of this alliance, and perhaps of this presidency, is being written in real time, and you need to understand every word of it. Let's get precise about what Carney's Arctic energy proposal actually means on the ground, because this is the specific mechanism that Putin will evaluate first, and it tells us something important about how sophisticated this whole operation is. The Beaufort Sea disputed zone referenced in the proposal sits at the intersection of overlapping Canadian and American continental shelf claims that the United States and Canada have never formally resolved. By inserting a joint Canada-Russia framework into this disputed geography, Carney is not merely offering Putin an economic deal. He is forcing the United States to either clarify its Arctic territorial position under hostile diplomatic conditions or cede the impression that Canada speaks for North American Arctic interests independently. It is a legal and territorial chess move embedded inside an economic offer wrapped inside a peace proposal, 3 layers of leverage delivered in one document. The Bank of England governor, it turns out, has been studying more than monetary policy. He has been studying how to negotiate from a position that looks weaker than it is. And this morning, the lesson is complete.